this morning, we will have a conversation around what has happened in terms of the tenure of Lyn Mengich at the SRC. The chairperson of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, Lyn Mengich, is our guest once again this morning. Good morning, Lyn.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
I don't like this.
Why?
Because you're leaving.
That's good for me to hear.
I must register that from the very beginning. So maybe that sets the premise then for this conversation.
Yes.
Okay. And I think a lot of people, it's just one of the things that you expect where, okay, SRC Lyn is there. She's going to be there. So we just keep it moving, right? It's like, we don't just continue what you're doing and nobody should bother you. But we look at that. I think it's a little bit more elevated than that, is it not? In terms of the different things that have been done and the milestones that have been reached, and then let's go through some of that today. But it's a pleasure to have you here. You're in the hot seat again, and let's welcome you before we start to turn up the heat a little bit. We'll welcome you the proverb from CT, and it's an interesting one today. I like it very much.
Yes, our proverbs for the whole of this week have been from the People's Republic of Algeria. Interesting country, this one. Very, very interesting indeed. The natives of the country are actually the minority in the country. They are the Berbers. It's written Berber, but it is English, we say Berbers. They comprise them like 20% or 20-25% of the population. The other citizens of that country are actually of Arabic origin. And this country has actually had very many cultures and civilizations crisscrossing it. I mentioned at the beginning of the week, from Phoenicians to the Byzantines to the Romans to the Greeks to the Turks. All these people have at one time or the other claimed. Then, of course, the French came in at the end. Okay? Now, the proverb. Speak kindly or refrain from talking. Speak kindly or refrain from talking.
What do you think about that, Lyn?
Very interesting proverb. I guess in my mind I'm thinking, yes, speak kindly. What does really mean to speak kindly? You know, because when you say speak kindly or refrain, so what does kindly mean? Does it mean you don't say the truth? Or does it mean I worry about your reactions more than the truth? Or does it mean be kind by telling people the facts and the truth, and they deal with it? So what does kindly really mean in this context?
What do you think it means?
I actually think it just means that to be kind means that I tell you the truth, even if it hurts. And that really, it's not about you, it's about the facts, you know, that are placed before you. And then it says, or you know, so be kind or don't speak.
You know, take for instance, if someone disagrees with you on something which they have a little more knowledge than you do, the option is, what do you use for thinking? Use your brain. Or, I think there may be an alternate perspective on this subject. Perhaps, maybe I could share with you.
Yes, the way you pass the message matters.
Yes,
not just the message.
Yes,
it is the how.
Thank you. Now, that is where the consideration comes in.
It is the how.
That's where the kindness comes in.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. This is getting us into a conversation around where many truths may have been spoken, but maybe they've not been so kind. Many kind things have been spoken, but maybe they were not so true. But if we look at the last 6 years, we're calling this the exit interview because you've decided to speak with us this morning about, okay, it's been 6 years as the chair of the SRC. Let's do an overview. When you took this appointment 6 years ago in 2018, what did you think you were getting into this chair role to achieve?
You know, the good thing is that the Constitution is very clear on what is expected of the Commission, including the role of a chair. So as I took this mandate, what I could see is what is written there. You know, that you've got to worry about the wage bill in Kenya. Is it affordable? Is it fiscally sustainable? It was also very clear that there was a concern by Kenyans on equity and fairness in pay in remuneration, and that we've got to address it. There were concerns around ability to attract and retain the skills in the public service. There were concerns about performance and productivity. So it was very clear that there were concerns on the wage bill, but beyond the wage bill number itself, but other elements of remuneration. But probably what I didn't realize at that point was, because it's a constitutional mandate, then you expect that all state organs understand it and would then work with you in the journey. But obviously there are people who look at it differently, and striking that balance of the expectation from state officers, from other public officers for increased pay is something that we had to start looking at differently, because on the surface of it,
manageable in the face of, because really, I don't think there was a time that you had stepped into this position that the economy was doing so well that you didn't have to worry about the wage bill. So was it a continuous monkey on the back of the commission to make sure that you're staying within this huge responsibility?
Absolutely. The entire period as we came in that year, the wage bill to revenue ratio was quite high at 51.5%, and the target is not more than 35%, which is spelled out in the PFM Act. So it actually says not more than.
Yeah.
So as we come in, you can see that the wage bill is way above the target, and at the same time, it was very clear that the expectations from the public officers, both state and non-state officers, was to increase pay. So from the onset, it was very clear that we've got to stay focused. And as you rightly said, just 1 year down the line, COVID-19 struck, right? What happened to the economy? So again, we had to always be on the alert to see where is the economy taking us, and can we afford any increase at all. But at the same time, there is also cost of living is going up.
Yes.
So as the cost of living is going up, employees expect some adjustment. But at the same time, the economy is not doing well. So yes, absolutely, for the entire 6-year period, you've got to be alert. You've got to see what's happening in the environment and ask that question: can the economy afford? Can the taxpayers afford to take this burden at the expense of development and other government priorities?
So when you look at salaries and remuneration, and it is for government spending, for state officers, for public officers, it is how much they would earn, essentially. What fueled the decisions at any point to either increase or decrease? Because it would seem as if the SRC was there to say, okay, every now let's raise this by 5%. But we did see that during this time, there was often a decrease of how much. Sometimes there was a complete removal of certain things, allowances here and there. What fueled those decisions, and then how would you then make sure that there was a balance?
The first thing that fueled that decision is about affordability and fiscal sustainability of the wage bill. When we talk about fiscal sustainability, we are just simply asking, can the country sustain it going forward? But there is also the question of affordable. Do we actually have the cash to pay? That's affordability. And then the other question which we kept asking is about the equity and fairness in pay, and whether that pay should actually be paid. I'll give you an example. The allowances that you mentioned that we abolished. When we looked at plenary sittings for members of parliament, for MCAs, so you're getting a salary,
yes,
and you're being paid to do the same work. So that amounts to double compensation. So that is now not about affordable so much, but it's about, is it fair to pay for what looks like double compensation? Because you already have a pay, why should you get a sitting allowance? Or the same way we looked at internal task forces that were formed by different state organs. So you form a task force internally to discharge the very responsibility that you are supposed to discharge. So we have task force committees, internal committees. So again, those we had to abolish. Again, it is that question of, is double compensation? It is not fair. We also had a taxable car allowance that used to be paid to cabinet secretaries, permanent secretaries. That again we abolished for the same reason. And the judges also were part of that. They're also getting that taxable car allowance. Although of course that matter went to court. But all that is about not just worrying about the wage bill growth, but it's worrying about the equity and fairness in pay, and whether indeed we can say that the taxpayer should actually shoulder that pay as is. So those are the things we have to keep balancing all through.
As you talk of balancing, just walk us through, one, the mandate of the SRC and the powers that you actually have, or the absence of powers that you actually have, because we sometimes may assume that you're able to do things which you actually cannot do.
That's true. In terms of the mandate is to review, set remuneration and benefit of all state officers.
Review and set.
Yes, for all state officers. Okay. The second mandate says to advise both the national and county government on remuneration and benefits for all other public officers. So other public officers meaning not state officers. But then the Constitution goes further to spell out the how. So that's the mandate, but it then spells out principles by which we make those decisions. So there are 5 principles, 4 in the Constitution, 1 principle in the SRC Act. In the Constitution, the first principle is that one of the need to ensure affordability, fiscal sustainability of the wage bill. Then the need to ensure attraction and retention of requisite skills to discharge functions of government. The need to recognize performance and productivity. Transparency and fairness. Then in the SRC Act now speaks about equal remuneration for work of equal value. So that also is about equity, but also speaks of fairness. So that spells the how. Now you've asked about, so what are the powers of SRC? What powers do we have? So we do have the power to set to advise, as I've mentioned. But what we don't have is to completely enforce everything the way we would like. So enforcement sometimes is not all of it in our power. The other thing is...
Who shares this power with you? The enforcement.
Okay. Let me give you an example.
Please.
We do carry out monitoring and evaluation.
Yes.
So we might find that we have advised on sitting allowances. Right, and you often find in the report of the controller of budget, there will be a report saying that this county assembly or this institution, they have had sitting allowances that is way above in terms of the amounts what SRC has advised. So at that point, who then enforces that? Because yes, we have said this is the maximum that you should count sitting allowances because we put a maximum. But you've gone ahead and gone above that. Or, then who then enforces that absolutely? Then that now is no longer within the mandate of SRC to enforce. Okay. So we have set. So that's just one example. And other areas, for example, is when it comes to the wage bill, the drivers of the wage bill are many. Some are within the control of the Commission, some are not. So we can control the rate.
Yes.
And we set and we advise. But when we look at what else is actually driving this wage bill, one of the biggest drivers is the numbers. You see, that's not within the purview of the Commission. So you will find, for example, and you'll see in the wage bill, part of the growth is attributed to employee numbers.
Yes.
Now, those employee numbers, they're not necessarily bad because, we are a developing country.
Yes.
Our population is growing. So as your population is growing, there are certain services you must, as a government, provide. And education, security, health, you will see growth in those numbers. And we have no problem with those numbers. But sometimes you actually see numbers that are worrying. And we see this especially after every election year in the county governments. When a new administration comes on board, they tend to recruit. And you see some of this recruitment is more political than is required.
Yeah.
But that decision to hire is not within the purview of the commission. We cannot enforce. That is not our mandate. So that's why I say there are areas we can control the wage bill, and it is within our power. But on the other hand, there are certain drivers that are not really within the absolute control of the commission. Yes.
Okay, it's interesting that you say that, because then you can set and you can recommend, but from what you're saying is that there is, or let me ask, is it then possible for anybody within a seat to then say, yes, SRC has set, it's constitutional, they've recommended, but we're going to put that aside for now and then just go the way we want with an HR function? So even with the set and recommendation, they are bound to follow what SRC is saying.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That one is absolutely, once we set, then you must implement.
Okay.
Once we advise, it is the same. It is binding to the institution. First of all, it is binding to obtain the advice. And then once it is given, then it is also mandatory to comply with that advice.
Have you found that in the last 6 years, Lyn, that there has been a saving, or that there has been then prudent spending when it comes to salaries and remuneration?
Is there prudent spending in this space? I'll say it in two ways. One is we've got concerns on payroll. Yeah, and you may note that in the last wage bill conference, it was one of the resolutions that as a government, we need to have an integrated payroll system that then allows all players, including the commission, to actually be able to see what is going on. Why is payroll, for example, a concern? Is because, for one, we have payrolls that are manual. And if you have a manual payroll, it is very difficult to control, you know, and they are there.
Yes.
You know, you have manual payrolls or you have multiple. So you have an institution that has both automated payroll. They also have another payroll that is not automated. So the essence of payroll, then I would say, I cannot say absolutely that there is proper utilization of that resource, because we need to have an integrated system where all the payrolls then we are able, for example, you know, as SRC is able then to go in and see what is happening on the ground. But yes, we have advised. But can we absolutely say everyone is complying to that? Probably not. So that is one of the gaps that we still see in terms of ensuring prudent management of public resources. But if we look at the entire wage bill itself and say, are there loopholes? They will be there as long as we don't have a fully integrated payroll system that enables different institutions to interrogate that payroll properly. Yeah.
Okay. So has there been a saving that has been made?
Yes, we have made savings, a lot of savings. I'll give you an example, is on an ongoing basis. SRC receives requests, very many requests for different allowances, for pay reviews, and just from 2020 alone, because that is when we began really tracking this, we received requests worth, 150 billion. Just the requests, okay?
Okay.
We approved 46 billion. So you can see, out of that alone, we are able then to release, technically 105 billion. Meaning that if there was no SRC, these institutions could have just spent that money.
The money.
Right? But because there is a commission, they must come to the commission with their proposals. We must then analyze and advise. So you can see that savings. We've also had savings in the allowances that I mentioned earlier that were, that SRC abolished, amounting to over 11 billion. So yes, we've had savings just by SRC prudently looking at the requests that come through and being able to advise on lower amounts than the requests that we receive, abolishing the allowances that we see ought not to be there. So the answer is yes, we've realized the savings worth a lot of billions, 105 and then 11 billion on the allowances, yes.
When you took up this position and want to look at some of the politics that essentially fueled a situation, when you made decisions and looking at the challenges that you faced taking on what was bound to be controversial, from the very minute you said, I will do this, what are some of those ups and downs that you had to face going through and making some of these decisions?
The first case was about the house allowance for members of parliament. And this is a situation where the members of parliament felt that they should be paid a house allowance. And when we looked at the analysis, it was very clear that it is a no, because they have a consolidated pay. So if you have a consolidated pay, then you cannot say that you now must add on a house allowance. So our initial conversations with the Parliamentary Service Commission, we were very clear to them that this is our position, and they chose to take it on to court. So, of course, before we went to court, there was a lot of discussion around it, which wasn't very pleasant. But yes, the matter went to court. We went through the court process, but we are happy to say that in the end, actually, the commission was right, and the court ruled that they are not entitled to the house allowance. The next stage was, of course, because they had been paid this money, was the recovery, because, the court says whatever has been paid has to be recovered. So that wasn't very pleasant for a number of them, because they felt strongly, recovering money. It's not always an easy thing to recover money,
especially when you don't have it.
Yes, when you you've already used it, obviously. So that wasn't pleasant. It was a political situation where there was a lot of pressure to say we are entitled. But in a way, when I look back, it is good that it went through the legal process, because then the court then pronounced itself and clearly said this is the way it is. And we've had a number of those instances where the court then has had to interpret the mandate of the commission. The other one, you recall, there's a time during the BBI process. And at that point, the trade unions, especially COTU, was very loud about disbanding SRC. And it became a chorus everywhere as there was a caravan on the BBI. It was going with that message of disband SRC. And it was also a question of really not understanding and not appreciating the role of SRC. At that point, the trade unions felt that SRC was interfering in the collective bargaining negotiation process. Because you remember, before SRC, there is a tripartite that negotiates, and it's in the law, and we respect that. It is a tripartite. It is the employer, it is the employee, and then the Ministry of Labour comes in.
Yes.
But here now, the Constitution has brought another arm, which is the SRC. So it took a long time for everybody to understand where is the role of SRC in this tripartite discussion. And we kept saying, look, our role is to advise the employer. We're not dismantling the tripartite. We're simply advising the employer on behalf of the taxpayers on what is affordable, and that you can only negotiate within the parameters that SRC has advised the different institutions. So that was a lot of noise for a very long time. It was unfortunate that BBI discussions, it rode up on that. It became a political discussion. But in the end, what then has happened is we took a step to actually develop very clear collective bargaining negotiations guidelines. We spent a lot of time in sensitization forums with the stakeholders to understand our role. We went further to develop a curriculum with Kenya School of Government on collective bargaining negotiations. That has helped, and it has quietened that space that, at the beginning there was a lot of uproar around the role of the commission. As we exit, I'm happy that there is better understanding. I'm not saying absolutely accepting,
Yeah.
because when you still come back to us, and unfortunately we still find employers going ahead to negotiate very well knowing that they have not sought the advice. Then when they come, then obviously we are saying no, because you've gone outside the parameters in the Constitution. So we still find that once in a while, but the majority are beginning to appreciate the role of SRC and stick to that.
Okay. Sorry. A commission that deals with how much state and public officers will be paid, whether or not they will receive allowances in addition to what they earn, whether that will be decreased over time. It doesn't matter how you look at it, it is going to be heavily political in nature. Yes, we did. We heard chants many times coming from Parliament, coming from assemblies, saying yes, Lyn Mengich and her SRC must go. Because what you're doing essentially is that you're curtailing development by curtailing how much we're able. How are we supposed to do our job if every time you've come with your pen and you've said, cross this out? There's also the thought that came and said, well, you're doing bidding for somebody. You heard this. You heard it over and over again. You came under attack very many times where people would say that the commission is there to do the bidding of certain quarters. And there was also the call for, like you said, disband SRC. There was also the call for, Lyn Mengich not getting this thing right. You're curtailing development. How did you deal with that?
It's always being faithful to the Constitution. You stick to the mandate, and that's what we did. Is at the end of the day is to remember that the people of Kenya put the SRC in the Constitution for a reason. And they have entrusted the Commission with a responsibility. That responsibility is spelled out. It is very clear. So as we navigated these waters, yes, there will be those who are saying you're curtailing us, you're not doing this, some saying you're doing bidding. At the end of the day, it is about, we know we are doing the right thing because that is what is required of us in the Constitution. So that is really how we navigated all the waters. Having said that, it doesn't mean that we just, bulldoze our way and say this is our mandate. We must do it. And I guess it goes back to the proverb of kindness that you talked about at the beginning. It is the how. The how you navigate the waters is very, very important.
Yeah.
And one of the things that from the onset as a commission, we deliberately put in place a process for stakeholder engagement. We even have a committee of the commission that looks at stakeholder engagement, because we did realize that it is not going to be easy to just say this is our mandate, we must do it, because the other party must also understand where you're coming from, understand where we're coming from, so that when we say we're freezing salary structures, for example, during the COVID, although it was obvious to everyone that the economy cannot sustain an increase, it was not enough to just say we are freezing salary structures. We then had to speak to all institutions, explain to them what this means, and how to navigate the discussions also with the employees, because there are expectations. So deliberately bringing on board stakeholders did help. The other one, which we did twice, is to convene the National Wage Bill Conference.
Right.
We called it national because the discussion was not about government speaking to itself alone. It was, one, bringing all the government stakeholders, but also including civil society. We included private sector. We brought in the Taxpayers Association. So bringing in everybody so that we have one conversation around the national wage bill. So that then helps to to ensure that we walk along with everyone. So in the end, it's really, in summary, is to say, yes, as a constitutional commission, we are independent, but from the onset, we realize that that independence also means that you are interdependent. And therefore, you must collaborate and work together with the other arms of government without compromising your mandate, but so that you work together. They understand where you're coming from. And in the end, you may not agree. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we may not agree. But at least we have had that conversation and you know where we are coming from and why we may not agree to your point of view. And we also hope that they have understood us in that way. So it doesn't mean everything was always smooth, because we still ended up with very many court cases.
Yes.
But at least we've had the conversation.
So the wage bill conference, which I wanted to touch on as well, it was in a couple of months ago, and the president was in attendance. The number was 35, and to have a conversation with all those bodies who are involved in making sure that you can actually bring down the wage bill, because what we're talking about now, wage bill, is that the monies that you pay in remuneration, salaries, emoluments, all of these things, to bring that number down to 35. One of the critical issues I remember watching and hearing was the numbers that you spoke of, which you have no control over. So even if you recommend or assign a particular amount of money, if you're not able to reduce the numbers, it really then becomes an exercise in futility. But what did you agree on that can actually be followed? 35% is the goal. It is very ambitious in a very short period of time. But what did you agree on? Or was it just another conference to show that, there were words being spoken?
We agreed on 10 resolutions.
10.
There are 10 resolutions. The previous conference, there were more, and we implemented 80%, so they are implemented. In these 10 resolutions, because I can't speak on all of them, but just to pick maybe one or two that will really, really help to drive the wage bill down. One of them was to take the ownership to the stakeholders and to say to every institution that they will develop strategies and plans on how they will achieve the 35%. That is a resolution that every institution will now go back, develop that strategy and plan on how to get to 35%. Now, then on the numbers, which you have rightly mentioned, it is not within the purview of the Commission to design the organizational structures and to approve staff establishments. That's the other area that there was a specific resolution on staff establishments, because when we looked at the approved staff establishments today, on average, government is operating with 62%, around 60% staff establishment. And the wage bill is where it is today, which means if we filled it to 100%, it would just go overboard.
Through the roof.
Completely. And that's a big worry, is that you have staff establishments that are approved, meaning that the institution can actually recruit, right? And therefore, it was good to have the conversation and say, no, this staff establishment needs to be relooked at afresh and come up with staff establishments that is aligned to achieving the 35%. That is a resolution of the conference that now rests with other actors to initiate and implement. The same with organizational structures, the way they are designed. Because in the wage bill, in the discussion, it was very clear that one of the problems is the organizational structures are designed for career progression, not necessarily for a fit-for-purpose organization, right?
There's something that comes to mind even as you're speaking. I'm thinking, I actually hear what you're saying very clearly, but what is it that seems to be our understanding about job creation? Because everything we are seeing, it appears that those who are in decision-making processes, like Parliament, seem to think that job creation means government employs people. The issue of growing the economy so that within the economy, people can find
jobs.
Yes, and that doesn't seem to be an emphasis, because whether it's the county government, the national government, same problem. And there seems to be a fight to ensure, the county government is a mess. But anyway, there seems to be this fight that everyone must be employed within the government, or ways must be found to get people to employ within the government, which means then that resources that the government has will be skewed in the direction of paying salaries, resources that could have been used elsewhere.
Absolutely. The issue that you have raised is a critical point, is which one comes first?
Right.
Is the chicken and egg? Do I say employ, or do I create an enabling environment so that the private sector can grow and create jobs, right? And that's the conversation that in the wage bill conference, we actually called it productivity. Can we be more productive as a country? Because if we are, we will grow the economy. Yes, we can. Our productivity in Africa, and we shared the figures, that in Africa we were ranked 22 in labor productivity. In the world, we were ranked 155. And yet, as a country, we are saying we've got the best talent, which I believe, actually. I know we do have very good talent. Kenya has very good talent. So why would a country that prides itself of very good talent, when it comes to labor productivity, you are 22 in Africa? That doesn't add up. And it actually calls upon Kenya to say we need to take the issue about labor productivity very seriously. If we do, we will grow our economy. If we do, we shall create employment. So you don't start by employing, you start by creating growing the economy so that you can create employment. And that is where we need to switch the two. So I agree with you absolutely. We start with growing the economy, and then you can then create jobs. You don't create jobs fast.
And yet we seem to be stuck in that limbo where that just does not happen. That it can be used, this bit said, create a conducive environment so that, things can happen thereafter. But it seems to be that it's said, but that the requisite action then, unfortunately, is not taken. And we have commissions who advise. We have people in Treasury that advise. There's an entire planning ministry that advises on things like this, planning towards the economy. Like you said, it's not just the SRC that sits alone, but they're institutions that are interdependent. So then how would a working relationship be? What would it look like to say that you can recommend and set things here, you can plan here, you can implement here, but until and unless all of this is working in tandem, then we're actually retrogressive as opposed to progressive.
There's this thing called a Ferris wheel. Or is it the hamster and the wheel?
Both same concept.
Yes. Because look, I'm thinking, when you look at our education system, what do we train people to do? The CBC tried to get her out of the rat, but the CBC has many, many complications. Why I'm asking the question, there was this the conversation I was having with the Honorary Council for Estonia. And what she told me was something very interesting. Their curriculum requires, by the time someone gets to the level of secondary school, part of what you're examined in is the conceptualization of a project, the actually implementing the project while you're still a student, and the ability to actually actualize it when you leave college. So essentially, by the time you leave college, you are leaving college when you're already self-employed. And that is why you'll find in a country like that, jobs come a begging. There are more jobs than there are people who are willing to do those jobs. But given our education system and the way it's exactly constructed, it looks like we'll never get out of this rat until we that particular nexus is tweaked. Because so long as people are inculcated into a culture that makes them believe that going to university automatically affords you a job where you will be employed, as opposed to you thinking of how it is, and the system encourages this, and we will never get out of this rat, especially when you look at how our populations keeps bulging.
Absolutely, and you're right. There's got to be a mind shift, a mindset change in the way we look at things. And just going back to your point, and you're saying, yes, we how do we get it done? Because we can all talk about we need to be more productive. We need to, your point, we need to look at our education system. Where do we begin? and it was the essence of, although it was a wage bill conference, it was beyond wage bill. If you actually look at those resolutions, it is addressing the core of how services are delivered in government and how we can become more productive. So when we look at this interdependence, which is so critical for delivery of any government initiatives, then the question then is, how do you ensure it's actually implemented, that they are not just resolutions, and how do we get out of this quagmire? Yes, our population is growing, that is high in employment, very high expectations from the citizens, rightly so.
Right.
The young people are expecting more jobs. So then begs the question is, then where does this take us? And for me, it goes back to, we must be able to deliver. We must be able to do better. And that means having a more coordinated approach in the way services are delivered by government.
Yeah. If you were to do a self-evaluation, sometimes sticky, but if you were to give yourself a score, and with an explainer in terms of, how you then did perform over the last 6 years, from a national point of view, in terms of what the commission was mandated to do, what would that be?
Out of 10 or out of 100?
Let's do 10. It seems a little bit more manageable.
20 gives you more leeway.
I would say I would score, around 80% there. Yeah, I think there are things we could have done better, but I think we've done a good job.
What are some of those things you think you'd have been able to do better?
Okay, so some of the things, it goes to, there are things we could have done better, but I want to say it was because of budget constraints, because sometimes there are things you really want to do, but you can't do because you're constrained. One of the things that we really wanted to do is how to automate our processes better, have to leverage technology. Let me say to leverage technology, because for the last 6 years when we came on board, what we really wanted is to have a data warehouse where we can then be able to interrogate using data intelligence to be able to interrogate the entire wage bill and do a wage bill forecasting. And, theoretically, we've been looking at a wage bill forecasting model that will enable us to forecast on where the wage bill is going, but be also able to have an intelligence system that really is analytical to give us the data on what is in the wage bill. So that one we didn't quite achieve. We had the vision, we wanted to do it. We really didn't get the money, as it is the budget, to be able to do that. So I can say that one we did not achieve. We would really have liked to have done a little bit more on that. And of course, in any situation, there are things that you can't always say, you've done 100%. We can do much more and better in stakeholder engagement, especially the public. I think there's
communication and awareness.
Yeah, there's a lot we do that we realize not everybody actually knows how much we've done. So we do try in terms of communication, but I think it could be better so that there is better and closer collaboration and understanding beyond our immediate stakeholders. I think the immediate stakeholders, we did a lot of stakeholder engagement, but probably with the public out there, we had 1 or 2 engagements with civil society and some of the external stakeholders, but I think it can be much better. Get other people to understand. And it's not just SRC. I actually feel we have a forum for all commissions and independent offices. And we've been asking ourselves that question, that as commissions, we have another role that we hardly speak about. Chapter 15 commissions, Article 249, gives us 3 key responsibilities. That's why I said, we can't be 100.
Right.
And it talks about promoting constitutionalism, right? And then it talks about, so when you say promoting constitutionalism, what have we promoted?
Right.
Okay. Protect the sovereignty of the people of Kenya. That's huge.
It's big.
How do you protect the sovereignty? And then it says, ensure observance by all state organs on the values and principles. So that part of beyond the SRC immediate mandate, I think we could have done better, not just as SRC, but collectively as constitutional commissions. When if we are tasked then to protect constitutionalism, promote constitution, protect sovereignty of the people of Kenya. And I look at it and I look back and say, how much have we done on that one? And I say probably not as much as we should. Maybe we've stuck too much on our individual mandates and focused on, let me deliver my SRC mandate.
That mandate before that.
But there is that other bigger mandate for constitutional commissions and independent offices that needs to be more prominent and to every commission to speak more to that part of the Constitution, Article 249.
Okay.
So that's why I say, that's another area.
We're coming to, we're right at the end of it already, but in 10 seconds, really, Lyn, given another opportunity to have another go at it, Constitution allowing, would you?
Yes, Constitution allowing, but it doesn't.
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
To give another opportunity. Thank you. You still have some time there. It'll be interesting to see how you wrap things up. Thank you so much for being our guest this hour and continuing to look at the work that the SRC does and also of taking stock in terms of what could have been done better, time and resources allowing, and just those general attitudes. Thank you very much for being here. And of course, our conversations with you will continue into the future. Asante Sana.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.